Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Hummingbird Cake. That's right, I'm not sure if this is the best cake ever, but it is certainly the best cake ever named after a bird. And when you consider what a proven crowd pleaser this is, and just how simple and easy it is to make, maybe it is the best cake ever. And depending on where you're from, this is either one of your favorite cakes, or you've never heard of it. And if you're in that last group, it only takes making this one time to be in the first group. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And other than buttering and flouring a couple cake pans, the only prep we need to do is dice up some bananas. And for this, you're going to need about 3 medium-sized ones, which of course we're going to peel, at which point we'll cut it in half. And then we'll slice it in 2 lengthwise, and then once more down the middle. And once that's set, we'll turn them and cut them across into about 1/4-inch slices. And of course, you can cut these as large or small as you want. But the bananas do need to be very ripe and sweet. Okay, not mushy. We still need to be able to cut them, but still they should be fully ripe. And for this recipe, we'll need about 2 cups total. And that's it. Once our bananas are prepped, we can move on to this extremely easy batter, which will involve adding some white sugar to some all-purpose flour. And then to that, we will add some ground cinnamon, some baking soda. No, not baking powder, baking soda. And of course, some salt. And that's going to be it for our dry ingredients. And we'll take a whisk and give that a quick mix before moving on to the wet stuff, which will include a lot of vegetable oil, as well as 3 beaten eggs. And what we'll do once those have been added to the bowl is grab a spatula, and we'll mix this until we basically have something that looks like mud. Delicious oily mud. And by the way, it's that oil that gives this cake its unique moist texture, so don't be afraid. And once we've spatulated that until it looks a little something like this, we will stop and add the rest of our ingredients, including some real pure vanilla extract, followed by a cup of finely crushed canned pineapple, although yours doesn't have to be finely crushed. Right, some recipes use larger chunks so that you can see the pineapple in the cake, but personally I prefer something nice and small, as I think it produces a moister texture, but of course suit yourself. And then after that we can go ahead and add our diced bananas, followed by a whole bunch of chopped pecans that you should probably lightly toast first in a dry pan, since that does make them taste better. And that's it. We will grab our spatula and mix this until it's thoroughly combined. And just a heads up, it's going to be super stiff and firm when you first start mixing, but fear not. After about a minute, it's going to loosen up. And by the time you're done stirring all this together, you should have a nice pourable batter. And that's it. Once our batter ingredients have been battered into a batter, we will divide that equally between 2 9-inch buttered and floured cake pans. And I should mention, traditionally this cake is made in 3 layers, but personally I think 2's easier and saves us a little bit of work. But anyway, you decide. I mean, you guys are, after all, the Dr. Birds, of whether this should be divided into thirds. And by the way, this cake's original name was Dr. Bird Cake, which is the name of the hummingbird in Jamaica where this originated. So just a few fun facts for you. But whether you do 2 or 3, before these go in the oven, we're going to want to give them the old shake-a-shake-a, followed by the old tappa-tappa, which of course is going to settle down the batter and bring any air bubbles to the top. And that's it. Our cake is now ready to transfer into the center of a 350-degree oven for about 35 minutes or so, or until they're beautifully browned and hopefully look like this. And just to be sure these are done, we'll go ahead and test it with a skewer, which should come out clean, and mine did. And if it comes out dirty with raw batter on it, put them back. And then what we'll do is let these sit and cool for about 10 minutes before we remove the cake from the pan by inverting them on a cooling rack. And if you generously buttered and floured your pan, these should come out pretty easily. And that's it. Once those have been depanned and racked, we will let those sit for at least an hour or until completely cooled. Since I don't know that much about cakes, but I do know you can't frost them warm. Speaking of which, while those are cooling, let's go ahead and make our cream cheese frosting, which is going to start with 1 pound of cream cheese, plus 1 stick of room temperature unsalted butter. We'll also do a little splash of vanilla extract. And then using a whisk attachment, we will go ahead and cream this together before we add our powdered sugar. And of course, as usual, you might have to scrape down the sides with a spatula. Except please turn off the machine when you do it, since doing that with the machine running is not very smart. But anyway, like I said, we'll go ahead and cream that together until it's nice and light and fluffy. At which point we'll stop and add 1 box, which is 1 pound of powdered sugar. And they say you're supposed to add this in 3 or 4 additions. But you know what? They say a lot of things. So what I do is just add it all at once, and then I'll just start very slowly turning the mixer on and off to get it started. And then once it starts getting incorporated, we can go a little faster. And this method really works great, unless all the butter and cream cheese get stuck in the middle of the whisk. And then not so much. So I had to stop and clean that out of the center, after which things went a lot better. And once that sugar does get incorporated, we can turn our mixer up to high and whip this for a few minutes until it's very, very light and creamy. And by the way, believe it or not, this is the Chef John Extra Light version of cream cheese frosting, which only has half the butter and half the sugar of the classic recipe. But to me, taste and texture-wise, is still absolutely perfect. So I'm not sure exactly why they're putting in all that extra butter and sugar, but trust me, you don't need it. And that's it. Once we have a beautifully light and creamy and fluffy spreadable frosting, we can move on to frosting and layering our cake. So I'm going to place one layer down in an inverted cake pan, and then transfer on about half our frosting, or whatever amount of frosting you see fit. And we always want to start with a pile in the center, and then spread that out towards the edges. And since we're going to press down with the second layer on top, we do not want to go all the way to the edge. So I'm going to leave about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch unfrosted. But anyway, once we have that first layer of frosting spread, we'll go ahead and place over cake layer number 2, and we'll give that a firm but gentle pressing. And that's it. We'll make another pile of frosting on the top, in the center, and again spread that towards the outside. And by the way, I learned the inverted cake pan trick in culinary school, since we didn't have enough cake wheels to frost on, and you can go around with a spatula frosting the sides, and you don't have to worry about it hitting a plate or the table. And of course, as I was doing this, I remembered I'm not going to frost the sides. So basically, I put it on this upside down cake pan for nothing. Although maybe in the future you will find that tip handy. And even though we're not going to top this with a 3rd layer, I'm still not going to frost all the way to the edge. Okay, I think it just looks a little neater and cleaner and more professional if you leave like 1/4 inch all the way around unfrosted. Alright, I can't explain it, but it does. And that's it. Before we decorate this and serve it, we have to chill it thoroughly. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer that onto a sheet pan and pop it in the fridge. And no, I don't have any idea why I left it on the pan. Or usually once in every video I do something I have no idea why. But anyway, the point is we want to chill this. At which point we can put that on a cake stand, and then top that with a hummingbird we made with candied sugar, which I wasn't going to show you how I did, since I didn't think you could do it anyway. But then I felt bad for thinking that, so I'm going to show you. Alright, I just drew a template and put it under my silpat, and then cooked some white sugar until it was molten hot and amber colored, and then I simply dripped and drizzled that over my pattern, and in a few short terrifying moments later, had what sorta kinda looked like a hummingbird. And did I nail it on the first try? No. The one you see me making here cracked, and then made a few more which didn't crack but looked terrible. But then finally on the 4th try, I nailed it, and that's the one you actually see on the cake. And when Michelle heard I was doing a hummingbird for the top, she thought we should add some edible flowers as well, which I thought was a great idea. And I went ahead and placed those beak adjacent, since I don't know much about hummingbirds, but I do know they like to suck on flowers. Hey, join the club. And that's it, my hummingbird cake was fully garnished and ready to enjoy. So I grabbed a knife to cut a slice, but I couldn't bring myself to break the bird, so I moved it over. But anyway, I cut a piece, which came out pretty good, but not good enough for the plate, so I cut a few more, until I got one I was happy with, and went ahead and plated that up with a few extra flowers. And that, my friends, is one of the best cakes you will ever taste. Or if you like carrot cake, and you like banana bread, there's like a 100% chance this becomes your favorite cake. And while it is pretty sweet, it's not that sugary one-dimensional kind of sweetness. Or thanks to the bananas and pineapple and pecans, it's a much more interesting kind of tropical sweetness. Which reminds me of the story of how the cake got its name. Okay, apparently whoever invented this in Jamaica thought that the cake's nectar-like sweetness would even attract hummingbirds. Or at least that's the story they tell. Alright, part of me thinks the real story of how hummingbird cake got its name is much, much darker. Oh, and if there was ever a cake to pair with cream cheese frosting, this is definitely that cake. Just a perfect combination. And on a personal note, I don't like a ton of frosting, so I didn't actually use the whole recipe, which means I have a little bit extra to spread on something else, to be determined at a future date. But anyway, that's it. My take on hummingbird cake. And by my take, I mean I copied exactly L.H. Wiggins' recipe, which was published back in 1978. Which according to historians was the first time it was printed in America. But origin stories aside, this is a truly delicious and beautiful cake, which is why I really do hope you give it a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.